Hello, everyone. It's good to be with you. Sorry we're a little bit late, but we're having technical issues as per usual, so it seems. Um, but we're back today, and we have Cheryl Shea Beatty with us again, and just excited to have her always on the show. Just bear with me a moment as I try to get us on Facebook. So hang on, hang on, hang on. Okay, that is done. Okay, so Cheryl Shea has been Cheryl Shea Beatty. I'm sorry, I always call you Cheryl Shea, but I've known you for that for much longer. She's been a guest before, and so we're just always so thankful to have her on as she shares her wisdom and her understanding and all of her good insights that she has. She's a retired now, actually counselor, and she was in the Red Deer area for many years, but she was in Edmonton before that. She was also my mentor, my counselor, my friend, my go-to person still today. And so thank you so much. And we're just going to bring her onto the platform now.
There we are.
Here we are. Thank you, Cheryl. Good to have you on. Today we're going to be talking about fear. Is there anything you want to start with before we get started? I have a couple questions that I actually wrote down here. So,
Well, actually, the first thing I wanted to start with was the reality that sometimes we should be afraid of things.
okay.
Um, so I think of people I've known where they were in, sometimes almost life-threatening situations, especially in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and they should have been afraid of the
Mm-hmm.
things that were going on,
Okay.
but they weren't enough to get safety for themselves. So sometimes, even though we're going to talk about getting rid of fear that keeps us from growing, I think we still have to realize that sometimes we should be afraid of things. So
Okay.
I think we're both in Alberta. Two major cities are Edmonton and Calgary. There's a big highway in the middle there. And most people, including myself, confession, don't drive the exact speed limit.
This is true.
This, yes, I knew you would agree with that,
That's
Cheryl.
true.
But there's some people that drive 40, 50 kilometers an hour over the speed limit. And I think you should be afraid of doing that. I don't care how good of a driver you are. Those limits are set there for safety. Go a bit over them, most people do, but to go to that excessively. And I think of people as well that I've known over the years where they were in a very physically abusive relationship. And
Mm,
while it was scary, they weren't afraid enough for their safety and sometimes the safety of their kids to want to leave that situation.
mhm.
So there's another fear underneath that, right? That keeps them from doing that. But I wanted to kind of start this discussion with at least saying, there are some things we should be afraid of.
Mm,
We should be afraid that if we just spend money all the time because God's going to provide, that maybe we might not have money to pay our mortgage or our rent the next month. Like there's some things where we should have some sense, maybe not of full on fear, but like of, gee, maybe I'm harming myself by this behavior. So just to start with that a bit. Um,
I just want to interject because I
yeah,
too Many years ago, I was still in Stony Plain, and I think the kids were both still at home very early on when I started working with you and dealing with people on my own. And I remember, I don't know if you remember her, I'm not going to mention any names, but I was working with a woman around that time who was in a very abusive situation at home as well. And it was a like I was very concerned for her safety because her husband was bringing in a loaded shotgun into the bedroom at night. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
I
Um,
don't remember that,
because I'm like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know. I'm going to have to call Cheryl. Right? That was many years ago, but that stuck with me so profoundly. And yeah, she just there was other fears that kept her locked in that space, and so she just wasn't going to leave because she was convinced he was not going to hurt her. And I'm like, geez, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, that's sometimes where the fear that keeps us in that thing that we should really be afraid of, right? We need to deal with those things so maybe we can deal with that real fear that actually is putting us in significant danger. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, do you want me to just kind of continue on then?
Yeah, yeah, wherever I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that that is very common, especially in abusive
Yeah.
situations where people are, they're afraid of the fallout more than they are of the immediate situation. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, so with relationships, which I think often are places where there's fear or where there's fear in the relationship or there's fear of getting into relationships.
Okay.
And I know for sure for me, I had a hard time building healthy connections
Mm,
years ago, because of my family upbringing where we didn't have great relational skills. And so one day it was a Bible study booklet with InterVarsity Press. I think I found this in. And I don't recall the specifics, and it was probably like 25 years ago, so I'm sure it's not in print. But if you're struggling in relationships, um, and you're not acknowledging the fear that's there, or you're finding that you're afraid to make friendships because you've been hurt in the past, then these four things could be helpful for you. And I wrote these down and memorized them, and I taught them to everyone in the ministry that we were in, and I still use it. So the first one is honesty.
okay.
So a healthy person that you don't need to be afraid of is going to be honest about who they are,
Mhm.
and they're honest to themselves about who they are,
Right.
right? So that would be someone that's saying, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm a very safe person, but they're not able to own their own stuff,
Right.
right? So an honest person would say, I've been going through some stuff. I want to make new friends, new connections, but because of some things in the past, I've had some difficulties. So just understand that about me. And that, or whatever that honesty is, that they are who you see them as, their behaviors, their words, everything like that lines up with what they say they are, who they say they are. Okay, so that's the first one. And you only really learn that over time with
That's
people.
true. That's true.
The next one is affirmation. So in a safe, healthy relationship, people say nice things to you to affirm you. That they need to say thanks. I really appreciated us having coffee. That was really great, right? They're able to say those things back. That indicates someone is a safe person as well.
Okay.
That there's some measure of affirmation or warmth, I'll call, in that someone can give you a hug, or, you're going through a hard time, put a hand on your shoulder, or there's just this sort of warmth and caring in the relationship is what I, in this context, talk about is affirmation. And then there's a commitment piece. And the commitment piece isn't words, it's actions. So commitment is you have a disagreement with a friend or a spouse, but you do the work to fix that conflict. You
Okay.
own your own stuff, the other person owns their stuff, and you work it through. And the thing about I still don't like blow ups or disagreements. I still don't like them. I never will like them, I'm sure. But what I've learned is when you go through that with someone and you both own your stuff, that relationship becomes deeper and actually becomes safer then.
Right.
So so that's a piece of dealing with, especially if you have fear in building relationships,
Mhm.
probably because you haven't known how to do it. I mean, I didn't know how to do it, and the fear part should have been there a little stronger than it was for me because I was just like, "Oh, that's fine." Um, but I've learned over the years that you need to go through these stages to know if you can be safe in a friendship, any kind of relationship, a job situation even, really, um, to be able to build a deeper relationship.
Mhm.
So if you have these kind of 4 things in your mind that you're kind of going through in any new friendship or situation, it can help you not be afraid because you know what you're looking for. And
Right.
and I think we sort of have this mystical view about relationships sometimes that then we don't really have these skills to discern,
Right.
what's good and what's not. And for those of you that are Christians out there, yes, I've heard a lot of people say, "Well, I think God told me da 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 da." And that's not doesn't necessarily make it a safe person. Sometimes we project those things on God's voice when it's really just us.
Yeah, that's huge.
So,
That's a
yeah,
huge point. I know people who have said that God told them to marry a specific person, and it's not been a good relationship ever.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you need to use your wisdom as well from God. So, with that, then we can have a fear of rejection. Um, so hopefully this can help us deal with that. But we can have a fear of rejection because we've been rejected in the past. And I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you don't get even into your teenage years. I have a couple of teenage daughters now, and I mean, they're teenage girls. They're going to get rejected by their friends, right? It's just how it works. But if we don't sort of learn how to deal with that rejection and learn, oh, okay, that friend, and this happens as adults, that friend rejected me, but actually, now that I think about it, maybe that wasn't a healthy relationship.
That's good.
So so we don't wanna be afraid when that happens. We need to build those skills so that maybe that doesn't happen so much for us. But we
Mhm.
also have to realize that rejection does happen. Even if we think we've
Mhm.
done everything we possibly can,
Mhm.
uh, there will be times where we've had a friendship for a long period of time, and for whatever reason, it breaks down.
Mhm.
But we don't want that when we talk about things like fear of rejection, we don't want it to become like a stronghold in us.
Oh, that's
So
good.
so it doesn't become something that we avoid all the time because we're afraid of that rejection, because that's just rejection just happens. I'm sure
That's
there's people that I've hurt because they thought they were gonna be my best buddy, and it wasn't that kind of relationship, right?
right.
So
That's good.
So, yeah, even if people are decent people, sometimes that can happen.
That's very
So
good.
the bigger fear that I've walked through and seen other people walk through is called fear of abandonment.
That's good. Yeah.
So fear of rejection is kind of now here we are as teens or adults, we're dealing with fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment is something more deeper. It happens generally, we feel abandoned as children,
Mhm.
maybe even as toddlers, so we might not remember it.
Mhm.
But that's a deeper root in us, that fear of abandonment. Um, and you think of planting a tree, you're gonna plant a tree and you're gonna fertilize it and you might stalk it, put some protection around it so the rabbits don't eat it or so it doesn't fall over when it's setting its roots and stuff like that. And if you have a garden, you're going to tend it regularly and take if you're a good gardener, and take the weeds out. Actually, you're going to start with good soil. When we moved into this house, there was no garden, and it's like, yes, I get to have clean soil, because the house I lived in Edmonton was really old, and like it was impossible to take care of the weeds.
Right.
So abandonment leaves those weeds of distrust, of insecurity, of not being able to discern safe people in us,
Mm.
and can really distort um, what what how we see the world, I guess, and how we see ourselves sometimes, because
Yeah.
I think we then sometimes think like it's all about us. Well, it's about something that happened to us, but it's not about us. So
That's
these are some examples of types of abandonment we can experience as children. So we can have physical abandonment, um, like a parent dying, or divorce or separation, where there is a real loss of one parent. Um, Having parents that have addictions
mm.
means that they're not capable of emotionally connecting and providing that emotional help that we need.
Yeah.
So that could be addiction to drugs, alcohol, gambling, or work.
Mhm. Yeah, my dad I get that one. I feel that one because of my dad,
Yeah,
an alcoholic for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, and going through that inability of him to be there emotionally, right? Even when he was home, he was not emotionally connected, and, yeah, so I get that one. Which
yeah,
also then kinda went over on to my mom as well, right? Because, codependency leads to, kind of felt abandoned on both because her concern.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then any sort of abuse, so physical, sexual, emotional, or spiritual abuse as a child can lead to that fear of abandonment as well. Because again, it isn't that safe place where you can learn how to connect in a healthy way
Mhm.
with the people around you. And I read this found this in a book by an author. So I have to take my sticky thing off here so I can read it. Author named Kathleen Norris, who, if you haven't read her, she's great. She's writes about Christian spirituality, I guess. And this comes out of a book called The Cloister Walk, where she kind of hung out in monasteries for a while, and how her relationship with the Lord improved through that. But she was also a poet and a teacher. And so she was doing this poetry thing in a class of I can't remember what age, but elementary school, and they had to write a poem. So this was one poem that this one little boy wrote. My very first dad, it's called. I
Mm.
remember him like God in my heart, like the clouds overhead, and like strawberry ice cream and bananas when I was a little kid. But the most I remember is his love, as big as Texas when I was born.
Hmm.
Okay, now here's the kicker on this. The boy said rather proudly that he had been born in Texas, but otherwise told me nothing about his story. It was his stunned teacher who filled me in. She said things that did not surprise me given my previous experiences as an artist in residence. He's not a good student. He tries, but he's never done anything like this before. But then she told me that the boy had never known his father. He'd skipped town on the day he was born.
Wow.
So that to me is a poem written out of abandonment. So totally, which we don't think of about fear of abandonment, that we might actually like put things on people positively because they've left us. We want
Right.
to think of them as better than they actually were.
Mhm.
And then we still are stuck because we have this warped memory and a warped understanding of what healthy attachment looks like. So then what do we do as adults? We attach not in a good way because we miss that as kids.
Mhm.
Most of us have that to some degree, just so you know. Just so
That's
you're
right.
not going, "Oh, no, no, I'm the worst person." We all have it to some
Yeah,
degree. Because
yeah,
do any of us have perfect parents?
no.
No. So we all have it to
Mhm,
some
mhm,
place. So those are the 2 when I think of fear of things that we do need to overcome, those are the 2 big things relationally that we need to sort of find a way to name them
mhm,
and to start working through them.
mhm. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And that would be connected to fear of change, would it not, as well?
Yes. Yes, because um change is an interesting one though. So my fear of change is I'm very good with change if it's my thought and
Yeah,
I'm in control. Then I'm good. I might be nervous, a little tense about how that's going to work out, but if I'm in charge, I'm much better with change than change that someone else instigates in my life. And I
yeah,
think that's probably pretty common.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I
Yeah.
never thought about it like that, but yes,
Yeah.
yes. Or if it is somebody else's idea, I need time to wrap my head around it. I need time to consider it. I need time to kind of work out what is that going to mean? What is that going to look like? What is that going to feel like? What, right? Like time to just settle
Yeah.
my heart before I step into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it also depends on, like, the person that instigates that change,
Yeah.
how safe of a person they are. That's
That's
another good book about relationships to read is the Cloud and Townsend book, Safe People, is a good one. Yeah. It would be, like a 25-year-old book now, but
yeah.
it's very good. Um, yeah, like, if you have a job that you've worked at for a year and you get fired, you're gonna be upset about that.
Hmm.
But if you have a job where you've worked there 20 years, you had a good relationship with everyone, that's even gonna be a harder change to go through,
Yeah.
unless you really hated your job and then you're glad to be gone. Because you were afraid of making the change yourself in that case, right? You were afraid of looking for and I've met a lot of people like this too. "I hate my job." "Well, what are you doing to find another one?" "Well, but
Yeah.
and here's all the reasons."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
"Well,
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
yeah."
It's true. And I was thinking too, what you had said before about just before you said that, and then you said that, and my mind
Oh,
went
no,
to
don't
somebody.
tell me what I think I was saying, yeah.
I was going to make a comment on that or say something about it. Anyway, it'll come to me. Um, um, oh, about people in loss, right? Like when people have had a difficult relationship with somebody and it's been strained and hard, but they've been connected. That loss can oftentimes be much harder than a relationship with somebody when the relationship's been really close, right? Because
Yeah,
you have all sorts of things to kind of work through.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
complicated.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of like any kind of change, I don't think as human beings, unless it has to do with our personality type, but I think most of us struggle with change at some level.
100%.
Um, yeah. So our tendency is we want stability. Um, but it's not God's tendency to give us stability.
That's right. What would we do with Abraham? Go to a land that I'm not telling you where you're going, but go and I'm going to lead you and I'm going to make you a great people. That would not make any of us feel very good. It's like, okay, how do you obey that? It's like, okay, I'll just get up, pat my bag and go in one of the directions, right?
Yeah.
He'll lead
Well,
me.
and yeah, and Mary, the
Yeah,
same, right? Like, "Oh, yeah, you're gonna well, and her little, 'Oh, how can this be?' would be I think most of us would flip out.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, yeah, in scripture, there's lots of, like, okay, I'm telling you guys to change. No, 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 we don't really want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I read over a few months ago, I read over in the Old Testament the book of Ezra and Nehemiah,
Mm,
which we don't, maybe just speaking for myself, I don't usually go there.
true.
But the comforting thing in that for me, in terms of being human, was they convinced, I guess it's Nehemiah and Ezra that sort of convinced that they were in captivity, but it convinced it wasn't Xerxes, it was another guy that was the king, that they could go back and rebuild Jerusalem. So Ezra was the priest and Nehemiah was the operational commander. But it's in both of those books, it's like human nature. Yay, 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 let's go do this. We're going to serve the Lord. And then, like, by the time you get to the end of these small books, they've all gone back to the same old thing.
Yeah.
So, even as we go through this, be kind to yourself, realize that you're human and we don't do things perfectly. Like it was sort of for me it was like, okay, this is not good. But okay, we're human. We do this. We set out on this grand path of change and then we mess it up at some point. And this is being human and God understands that.
Yeah.
So, if you're in a place of going like, yeah, I know I need to make some changes in my life, but I did this and then I went and hid in a corner. It's like, it's
Yeah.
okay. Just
Yeah.
talk to God. He'll
Come
say,
out of the
it's
corner.
okay. Let's try that again. Get out of the corner. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, so my thought process, and this might be kind of steering you off in a direction you don't want to go, which if you don't want to go here, that's fine. I understand that. But I'm thinking about like generalized anxiety disorders and things like that. Like when we have these fears, what is the difference, I guess, between having a fear of abandonment and then having generalized anxiety disorder? Like how do you want to comment on that even
Well,
briefly?
yeah, I guess I would say that I would suspect that for a lot of people with anxiety, there is some of this wounding in the past.
Right.
But what's called generalized anxiety disorder would mean that you're anxious about everything. Okay. And for me, even with the abandonment and the rejection stuff, there was stuff that I wouldn't have called it anxious back then, but there was stuff that I was anxious about, but there was other stuff that was totally fine. So, if you do have a lot of anxiety, it would be good to talk to someone because it might be that anxiety is fear of change, fear of rejection, um, fear of abandonment. And sometimes this just comes to mind. I don't think this applies to everyone, but I think sometimes too, when we have those fears and anxiety, which was, I did this, I think, pretty much too, was then we become perfectionists.
Mm,
Because if we can do everything perfectly,
hmm.
then we're in control. So then we think we don't have to have that anxiety or fear. So if you are dealing with a lot of anxiety, it would be good to talk to someone and sort of work through like, you and usually you would start back when I was meeting with people if they had anxiety. I'd start off with sort of how to calm your mind and your body a bit before we got into the stuff that needed
Hmm.
to be dealt with. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'll say this just for anybody who might be grieving a loss. It's like I came to after James passed away, and we
Yeah.
chatted a bit about that. And there is a very real difference between, and nobody ever talks about fear that's related to grief. Like nobody talks about that. They'll talk about the anger and they'll talk about the depression and all those kinds of things, the loss, the grief. They'll talk about, but they never talk about the um, the fear that comes with loss. And there can be a fear that is very real with loss. And that is, I mean, trying the techniques. Like it seemed to me that during that period of time, it didn't matter what I tried, how much mud I threw at the wall, nothing actually worked. I had
Yeah.
ride the waves of grief to get to the other side. And there was some things I did learn in the middle of that, but it's very, that kind of fear is a very different fear than other things. So for, I guess I just want to say for anybody who's going through
Mhm.
a loss of, and you're in a state of grief, that if there's a fear that's there, it will pass. It will pass, but it's just the fear of knowing, and you have to wrap your head around who you are, but to look at that and know that the fear comes from, how am I going to do life without this person, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is my person who was my strength, this is my person who was the breadwinner, this is the person who made the big decisions, and now I'm afraid because I don't have that person, right? And yes, talking to somebody, I talked to you, I don't know for how long, um through all the construction in Edmonton to get there. That was fun. But yeah, so just, that's a whole different kind of a ball game as well, because it's kind of a situational kind of fear.
Yeah, and because everything's changing, right? So
Yeah,
whenever there's changes, I mean, we're having a big change in the world right now,
yeah.
huge change in the world right now, which I, for one, did not expect. Um, and and it's unsettling.
Hmm.
It's causing anxiety for lots of
A lot
people.
of people. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's good. That's good. Okay, so I have one more question before we get into some of the other things here, but are all fears connected? Do they all kind of have the same kind of root to it? Is that something you can answer? You're not sure?
I I I don't know. I think the best way to answer that would be that all fears have a root of something, but I think for different people it would be a different thing,
Okay.
right? Like I would still think in relationships, for me, if there's a fear in relationship, it's more connected with abandonment than about rejection.
Okay.
And for some people it's going to be more about rejection. And for some people, a change in a relationship is more about change, and that might go back to, really unstable family life or something where, I mean, there's going to be abandonment in there too, but, nothing was ever predictable. And so change then becomes a real fear. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That's good. So one of the things when we were kind of texting back and forth beforehand, and you did kind of like, okay, so when fear is a helpful response to a situation, did you want to, and then I'm,
Yeah, that's sort of what I touched on at the beginning, that there's some things we should be afraid of. So,
mm,
excessive speeding, taking drugs that aren't prescribed,
taking somebody else's drugs.
taking somebody else's drugs, yeah,
Yeah.
sort of a naivety sometimes about how people are in life is, we should get some wisdom around that. Yeah.
So how do we know the difference between, because if we're feeling that fear, if we're feeling that anxiety, how, like, I mean, just recognizing, because people who are in those situations don't recognize the fear,
Yeah.
they don't recognize the harm or the danger that they're in, or that they're putting other people in. They don't recognize that. So if you're the one struggling with fear or anxiety in a situation, how do you know the difference between the helpful fear and an unhelpful fear or harmful fear?
Well, a helpful fear, ultimately, when you ask yourself some questions about it, is trying to protect you from something
Mm,
legitimate, something that's legitimately gonna hurt you. I don't know if I would have called it a fear, but when I was a teenager, I thought alcohol was stupid. I went to a
I did
party,
not.
high school party, and I'm like, "This isn't fun." All these people are sitting around getting drunk, 17, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. I'm like, "This is not fun." And it was like the middle of winter, 30 below in Winnipeg, where I had to walk everywhere because I didn't have a parent that drove me everywhere. And so I left and walked home and watched Hockey Night in Canada with my dad. And they're like, "You're home early." It's like, yeah, it was kind of boring. Because there was something about people being out of control that I was afraid of. I wouldn't have put that
Mm,
word on it then, but but all these people being out of control just didn't seem like where I wanted to be. And I don't know that I would have called it fear, but I'm forever thankful. I wasn't really following Jesus then. I'm forever thankful that somehow I went, yeah, don't go down that path. It doesn't end well, you know. So I
I
think
could have
there's,
had some of that, I think. I did,
yeah.
but I should have. I didn't even hate the fact that the alcohol, like the getting drunk and stuff like that, even though I grew up with it. And maybe that's why I was kind of numbed,
Yeah,
right? Like the effects of it. It's like, yeah, well, this is what people do, right?
this is
So,
what people do. Yeah, yeah. Where I didn't have that kind of background. And I mean, on the other side for me, I really needed to always try to feel like I had some control. So
mm,
there was that in there. But you know, that was, I think that was, while I wouldn't have called it fear, it was like, I don't want anything to do with this.
hmm
So I think fears that are legitimate, I think ask someone wiser than you if you can't figure it out to just say, hey, like I started this job. I This is what goes on sometimes there. I don't know. Like, is that me being overreactive, or is that normal, or how, get some outside perspective then from yourself,
hmm
and also in relationships. And have friends in your life that will say, yeah, that sounds okay, or
yeah,
what are you doing? Right? Have people like that.
yeah,
Make sure you have people like that in your life. Yeah.
yeah,
And if you don't, then you have to go see a therapist, and someone that's directive, that doesn't just go, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh,
yeah. No,
uh-huh. Like someone that'll say, what are you doing?
absolutely. I agree with that 100%. You can throw your money away, or, yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. So I'll let you, is there something else you wanted to bring up now? I have other questions I can bring up, but
Oh, bring some other questions. Yeah, that's all I had on my list there. So
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so thinking about fear, obviously there's different levels, right? But so how does somebody go about, if they don't want to go see a therapist, how do they begin the process of tackling their said biggest fear, or their fear, their smallest fear? Like some people that I know are really afraid of things like spiders or heights, or it's not an overwhelming constant fear of many things. It's a specific fear. Um, and how do you begin? And I would say this, maybe success or failure, fear, failure, those things are different. But how do you begin to self um, become aware? I guess, like, begin to self heal or whatever.
Yeah. So if you realize that there's a fear, here's another acronym to write down.
Okay.
Fear can be false
Okay.
expectations appearing real.
Okay.
So let's talk about spiders. Okay, if you live in the southern states in the desert, there are spiders that can bite you and kill you. Here in Alberta, there are not. They're icky. I don't like them, but I didn't like them in my basement, so I killed them, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in a situation like that, that's a false expectation appearing real. So they're icky, you don't like them, but there's not a legitimate reason to be afraid. So that would be a starting place. Like if you're having those fears, like, okay, what is this? If you're afraid of relationships because you grew up in an abusive family, that is something you need to work through about how do I know if there's healthy relationships? And I gave you some tips about that.
hmm hmm
Um, so that can be there, and that's sort of the starting place with fear, is what there's an expectation under there about what's going to happen in that situation, and
Right.
is that realistic or not realistic.
That's very good. Hmm
um, and so you also need, so I'll just mention this, I'm sure it's mostly women on here, but a lot of times, um, if you're a woman that's been in an abusive relationship, there's a tendency sometimes, from what I've seen, not all the time, of course, that you end up with other women friends that bash men.
Yes.
So, if you're wanting to find out what a healthy relationship is, you need to start connecting with women that are married that have healthy relationships, just so you can see what that actually looks like. I hope that makes sense.
It does. The question that ran through my head was, how do you find those? Like, I mean, if you're in a church, and I'm really like with Jared, he just got married in November of last year. And so they are in their church. You do the marriage counseling through their church. It's a big church, of course, that not every church can do this, but they set you up with an older mentor couple who can walk with you in your marriage.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, it's a great idea, and I thought that's really powerful, right? To be able to help you know how to navigate the tough stuff that's going to come along, and the
Yeah.
the rough roads. But say you go to a small church of 30 or 50 people, or 100 people, and or you don't go to church at all, and you're looking at environments, and you're looking at the people you work with. Let's just start there with the people that you
Yeah.
work with. Not often are those relationships ones that you would go, wow, I'd really like to emulate that. It's like,
Mhm.
why are you still married? Like, dude, right? Like, so how do you find those relationships? Is there, other than, like, how would you go about
Well,
doing
there is the piece then that you have to be not afraid to take a little bit of risks in
right?
getting to know people, right? And then that honesty, affirmation, affection, commitment piece. You can use that as kind of a reflection on, okay, is this person just seem really plastic, or are they honest about,
Mm,
what's going on?
mhm.
Um, I'm trying to think of the guy's name that's wrote a lot of marriage books, and I can't think of it because there's some good stuff in there too. Uh,
Some of his, I can't think of his name either. Um, Let me see. Is it over here somewhere? I know it's in my pile somewhere.
okay, I think it's Gary Chapman.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, Five Love Languages, and there's some other ones. I'm just going to turn around and look at my bookshelf quickly.
okay.
Um, oh, here's one. I knew that was this other one. This is the other guy. Okay, for your Christian believers, not he's actually Jewish. John
Okay.
Gottman. Oh, that's all backwards, I see.
No,
But
yeah.
it's Seven Principles for Making Marriage Work.
Okay.
And his stuff is really, really good. He's got some videos and some, I think they have some like um, things you can buy online that are really good. And it's all like he did studies, him and his wife at the time, researchers in a university in Washington State, to see what keeps people together. And it's very interesting because it's not necessarily what you think. And
Wow.
don't I can't remember what it is right now, so
Okay.
but I could read them off to you maybe. But it's his stuff is really good. So if you want a little more Christian perspective, Chapman, but I would recommend this one as well, um, because it's tested, I guess I would say, and
Right.
it's not necessarily a lot of the things you would necessarily think of.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, fear of relationships is a really big one because a lot of people too, when you come out of an environment where it's not safe and where it seems like you've never had any safe place to be, getting into a relationship like where you hope to get married, one of the things that often happens is you see people get in, and then there's the I'll reject you before you reject me. I'll break up with you before you break up with me. And so this can be a real cycle. Or another thing can be, people get married, they can do the happy part, but then when the tough times come, then they break up, then they divorce, right? And
yeah.
you'll find, so it's really important to really deal with the fear and take a look at it and begin to dissect it and pull apart, find out where it came from. Yeah, and I talk a lot about forgiveness because, maybe that's been the lifeline
Yeah,
is learning how to forgive people who've wounded you a lot, right? And so, like you said earlier, it's not like our parents are horrible people, it's that they made mistakes. But I'm a parent and I've made mistakes, right? And people watching, you're a parent, you've made mistakes, right? And it doesn't make you a horrible person, it makes you human, right? But those things still do affect our kids, right?
yeah,
So it's looking back at that and not saying they're horrible, but just forgiving them for the time that they lashed out. And because I mean, let's face it, I mean, we'll go back. My oldest son was probably about, I wasn't pregnant with Jared yet, so he would probably have been about 3 or 4, and we had gone to the grocery store to get some stuff and get groceries. And we had gone to Save on Foods, which I don't think I've ever been to Save on Foods since, because they put all the junk food on the bottom shelves so the kids can see it. And I'm like, this is a horrible idea. If you're the parent, bad idea. If you're the owner, great idea.
great idea.
You
Yeah.
know, but so he had got this tub of cookies, and he decided he wanted these tub of cookies and he wasn't going to let it go. And I kept saying, no, you don't need the tub of cookies. It's a tub of cookies. I have one kid, right? And he's 3. You're not going to eat all the cookies. The answer is no, right? And so he took the cookies and he threw them over his head like this. They hit, and it was in a plastic, one of those plastic clear containers, right? And it hit the
Oh,
ground and it went everywhere. And then now he's mad because he can't have the cookies, and the cookies are all over the floor. They're everywhere. And so he throws himself on the floor and he's kicking and screaming and crying. And my cart is half full of groceries. And I'm just like, nope, we're not doing this. And so I was angry, right? Because, first of all, that's embarrassing. But the second thing is like, there's no need for this, right? And people are, some people are going gentle parenting, and other people are going, you need to smack that kid. And I'm like, I'm taking this kid out of the store. And I left my cart and we walked out and we went home. We got no groceries, right? And so then that, like, you can look at an incident like that, and the way I see it and the way he remembers it are very different. He remembers mom's anger. That's what he remembers. He remembers that I probably in his mind jerked him up off the floor and put him in the car seat roughly, which probably I did do,
I was
right?
going to
I'm
say
not
you
gonna lie,
probably did do that. Yeah.
he did, right? And all parents out there will go, yes, I understand. But so his memory of that, though, is the anger. My memory of that is, you were being a little turkey butt, and I'm not okay with it, right? You're
Yeah.
not gonna
Yeah.
act like this, right? And so there's that aspect of it too, because kids have a capacity, only have a minimal capacity to remember all the events in a situation. And that goes the same for us too. So when
Mhm.
we're looking at situations in our home life where we've come out of, um, to take into consideration that, you know, um, maybe it isn't completely the way I remember. So you can have grace for them, but no excuses. I always say there's no excuses. So you can't say, when you're forgiving somebody, you go, well, I forgive them, but it wasn't probably this or that, or it wasn't their fault, or, they did the best they could. I always say no excuses, right? Because that dampens down the forgiveness that you need to do. And you need to touch that stuff on the inside of you in order for you to be free of it, and for the Lord to be able to heal that in you. So if you excuse somebody else's bad behavior, even if it was warranted, you still hinder your own processing that. So it's
Yeah.
looking at it and going, reality says, if he remembers it this way, he has to deal with it from that vantage point, not from the fact of what I tell him, or to excuse my behavior, right? I mean, I think probably anybody who has kids would have handled that the same way I did.
Yes,
But
probably.
but having said that, I could justify my own thoughts and actions. But the reality is, if he sees it differently, so he actually has to deal with it from that place and do the forgiving from that place of anger, because that would have been scary at 3 to see mom respond this way and to, yank him up off the floor and roughly take him out to the car and put him in the car seat and, just, probably yelled. I don't remember. But, those
Would
kinds,
have.
right? Like, I mean, it's a situation, right?
Yeah.
And so, but you have to deal with it from your place. You can't deal with it by making excuses for somebody else's behavior. And it's not like your kids want to look at you and say, "Oh, I'm going to blame all my problems on you." But if that is one of the things that they're struggling with, then you just need to say, "I'm sorry," right? Like that's, as a parent, that's so healing. Whether they remember it correctly or not, it's just saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't intend to do that," right? Like, I'm sorry, right? Just take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and forgiveness is always a process. I
mhm,
have to use I struggle with forgiveness. So I when if I'm going through a forgiveness process with someone, I imagine a hook on a wall, and under that hook is God, the name God.
mhm,
And and so I have to put that person on God's hook, not on my hook.
mhm,
So it has to be for me a very intentional, almost visual process of, and then I put them there, and then the prayer I say kind of goes like this: Lord, I choose to forgive so and so for, and then I say specifically what they did, and then I say because it made me feel, and then I release them to God. Now, we all would like to think we do that once and
mhm.
it's done. But you know the 70 times 7 thing?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that.
100%,
Yeah. It's that.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so I think too, I agree with that. That's what I teach as well. Didn't realize that through the years I probably got that from you, but I
You
have
might have.
I
I
may have
I didn't I didn't copyright it, it's okay. Yeah.
but that's what I teach too. Probably did get it from you. But I think, when you're dealing with the fears, right? Forgiveness is a huge component of tearing those apart, right? Like, to look at the person who came into your room at midnight, right? Uninvited,
Yeah.
right? And to forgive them. I'm not saying that it's okay what they did, but to forgive them so that you can be free and that you can be free of the bitterness. You can be free from the anxiety, from the fear, from the resentment, from the all the things that can come from that, right? Because I've had that happen to me too, right? When someone came into my room in the middle of the night, I have to be so careful on here about what I say.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
they boot you, right? But when you have that kind of a thing happen, it creates a lot of fear as well. And just the thing that will release you is just forgiving them. No excuses. There's no excuses, but to forgive them and release them either with the hook or I don't use a hook in particular. I just continually, anytime I feel something in my spirit, or when I'm in a situation and something comes up, then I go, okay, so I have to go back to
mhm,
that place and I have to
mhm,
do it again, right? So it's looking at it going, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? Why am I afraid? What does
yeah,
this remind me of? I'm going to
yeah,
go back there. I'm going to take that person one more time because it's fresh in you, right? And, taking it before the Lord and going, I'm just going to release, I'm going to forgive, I'm going to release this person into your hand, all the steps that you just talked about. So it's huge.
yeah, yeah, it's a process for sure.
It
Yeah,
is a process. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I hear people say a lot is this. They'll say, well, as Christians, it says 365 times in the Bible that we're not supposed to be afraid. So being afraid is a sin. What do you have to say about
it's
that?
not a sin, no. It's what you do with if you have fear. Emotions aren't sins. If you have it's what you do with that emotion.
Mhm. And I've taken it this way. I've said, maybe he said 365 times in the Bible not to be afraid because he knew very well that we would be afraid every day of our life, probably in different situations that we're in, that we're timid or whatever. And so 365 times he's saying, don't be afraid, trust me. right? And
Mhm.
so, and I've come to this conclusion too. I thought, when it comes to lots of things, even starting this, I'm like, oh God, I'm not good at technology. And you want me to do what? Okay, I can do this. I might not like it, and I'm going to step out and I'm going to do it. But even in that, or every time, that I've spoken, the first time I spoke publicly, or the
Mhm.
100th time I spoke publicly, there's always anxiety, there's always fear. Like, people thinking, "Oh, you don't look afraid." Oh, but I am, right? And so it's kind of like, you're gonna be afraid, but do it afraid, right? Like, it's like, do it, but do it afraid, right? Like, if you're gonna wait until you don't have that fear of abandonment or fear of rejection, if you get into a relationship or a friendship or something like that, you're not going to do it. If you're waiting for it to be gone, you're just
Yeah.
just not. So do it, but do it afraid, right? And taking
Mhm.
it little increments at a time sometimes, right?
Mhm.
Important too, to break it
Yeah.
down and tear it down.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Because what we do, I think, is we sometimes look at the whole thing, and we see like a great big roast beef or a great big apple pie or something, and we think, I got to eat the whole thing. Well, you're not going to eat it in one sitting. You're going to eat it at one little bit at a time. And so do what you can to begin to erode the fear by just looking at it and asking the Lord to help you with it too, and
Yeah.
and working through it, and facing it. Like, you have to face it at some point.
Yeah, otherwise you're stuck your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't you wanna be dealing with this when you're younger rather than when you're a senior, so, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
and just even, I'll just finish with this one. So, back during COVID, I wanted to start getting back into exercise, and I was a little nervous about going to a gym or something. So, the physiotherapist that was working on my back said, "Well, try this Pilates place." And, because you've got a big separation between your stations, and they clean things really well and blah, blah, blah. So I started, and I thought I was going to die. I would get dizzy, it was horrible, and, I mean, there was a bit of fear in there too,
Yeah.
and then I thought, "Well, maybe I need to go back down a level or something different that was easier." So I did that. I still couldn't do most of it. But now I am stronger, like, 3 years later, or was it 3 years? Yeah, 3 years later, I'm stronger than I've ever been in my life, and I'm 67 because I didn't let the fear stop me, and I even had an accident one day there, kinda hurt myself, and I could have given in to fear. I remember saying to myself, "Just because this happened, don't be afraid, don't stop." You know, you've done this for 3 years and nothing, you've not hurt yourself, and I just stuck with it, and I mean, in some ways it's a small thing, but it's not a small thing for me because 'cause I'm not Miss Athletic, never was in my life, but I think because I have worked through other fears in my life, I could see that there wasn't legitimate fear in this,
Mm, mhm.
and I could continue to move ahead in that area of my life.
Right. That's good. Yeah, and I think, when you say that, what comes to my mind is, to be your best cheerleader, right? So that
Yeah.
when you do it, you're the one that's going, but you did it, right? Like, you did it. And, so for you, you got back up and you continued doing it. You let yourself heal and you went back and you kept doing it, right? And so when you face a fear, whether it's spiders and you don't run away, um, or if it's a fear of, driving in the city. And I'll say this, I live in Calgary now. Calgary is way easier to drive downtown than Edmonton is. It's just,
Oh, okay.
it is a nightmare. And I hated driving down there. And, some of the dance moms, when the kids were dancing, we've remained friends. And they're always like, well, let's go always someplace downtown to have supper. I'm like, why can't we go somewhere where it's not downtown? Why can't we go to the west? Why do we always have to be right across from Rogers Place? You know
Oh, yeah.
door up, it's like, no, but I got to go there, right? And so having to face that fear. And then one time, because I'm directionally challenged, I found the place and I found a place to park. But then do you think I could find the place? Like I had to use I had to use my phone to walk me down the sidewalk to get where I'm going. Fear, right? Fear
Yeah,
is
yeah,
fighting,
yeah.
right? But when I was done, I'm like, I did it though. I found it. I drove downtown,
Yes,
found the place I was supposed to go. I went in, I had dinner with my friends, and I made it back home. I did it. Like, look at me, right? I'm
exactly. Yeah.
allow these fears to keep me, the fear of getting lost, the fear of being in an accident downtown, sometimes falling into one of the holes when you come around the corner downtown Edmonton. It's like but I did it, right? And so be your best encourager, be your best cheerleader, because you know when you've conquered a fear or partially conquered a fear that other people don't know, that you got halfway in the battle that you had to get halfway, right? Like, so be your best cheerleader.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts or anything, Cheryl?
No, I think you summarized it up really well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I did. I put those honesty, affirmation, commitment, action, and rejection does happen. I put those points on
Okay.
the chat. I'll also put them, and I'll put these books also in the notes so people can
Good.
buy them if they want to. And some of the other notes that I think that's all the notes I've made, other than the Gottman books for marriage. I'll put that. What was his first name?
John M. Gottman,
Okay.
and
So
it's Gottman.
I will
Yeah.
put all of those things in the chats. Okay, so how would you like to pray for everybody who's struggling with
Sure.
fear?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Lord, I just pray for people that are watching right now that identify a fear in their lives that has kept them from doing things for themselves, for um, being connected with other people, and ultimately from just like not stepping into the life that you have for them. Because I certainly have found that the life that you have for us isn't always easy. Um, and sometimes you ask us to do things and take steps that seem really hard. So I pray for all those listening here who have been encouraged by this and maybe not quite ready to take those steps yet, but willing to hear your voice about taking those steps and facing their fear. Would you put around them coaches, people that would encourage them, and may they be their own encouragement as they listen to you, Lord, to take the steps that they need to step to move out of things and to move into new situations and with new people, maybe even. We thank you for that, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to have you on again, as always, right?
Okay.
You're just
Okay.
a wealth of knowledge, and so thank you again. And for anybody who has any questions that you want to uh, pose to Cheryl, if you want to leave them in the chat, or if you want to put them on the YouTube channel or on Facebook underneath the recording here, go ahead and do so, and then I'll pass them on to her, and she will get some answers back to you, as will I if you have a question for me. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today and who will be joining afterwards. So thank you so much. Good
Okay.
night,
Bye.
afternoon. Bye.